Just because you're paranoid, it doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Vyzygoth's Grassy Knoll continues.
Here we go, part 2 with Andrew Colvin, and catching up on the months of synchronicities that we've been doing, shows like that in that vein for a couple of years, more so than I want to remember, which I can't remember, and Andrew always keeps reminding me I have my faulty memory, and I appreciate that. And at any rate, we're going to pick up where we left off. He had last spoken with regard to Ingrid Cold, and I think you're just going to make a comment about that, and we're going to pick up with what took place in the late winter, early spring months until now. And so take it away, Andrew.
Yeah, one more thing about Ingrid was that I found an article written in 1978 about the Ingrid Cold stuff in Official UFO magazine, written by Harold Salkin, and there's some oddities to the article. It definitely describes what sounds like a sort of a hypnotic thing was going on with Derenberger and Ingrid, that Ingrid was, things were moving around. Ingrid was using phraseology that sounds like that of a hypnotist. The craft was moving around strangely. At one point, Derenberger says it was up too high for anyone to see who was driving by. But then in the next breath, he's saying it was 6 inches off of the roadway. And there's a picture of a crashed VW Bug that has been hit by a truck in the article. And the caption is, "Mere coincidence? The very night of Derenberger's encounter, this collision occurred only 2 miles west of the meeting place." Driver of the truck said he was distracted by a silvery object in the sky.
They're called planes.
What?
They're called planes. Airplanes.
Well, yeah, I made the joke at the Fortean's West site that maybe, Cold was known to drive a Volkswagen, and in the picture, the license plate is blacked out. And this looks like a serious accident, too.
Yeah, it does. I saw that on that website. And what is your association with the Forteans at this point?
I am the Washington State Bureau Director of the League of Western Fortean Intermediatists, which is, I don't know if Forteans West is another, umbrella organization or not, but Forteans West is a little easier to say.
All right, do you want me? Well, never mind. I know you have some stuff up there. I'll put the link up to that as well.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
That's pretty much where I'm blogging right now.
Okay. Yeah, I did see that.
Well, but, these people running into cars is not unknown in this story. Harriet's dad was run off the road. Or I think actually the guy just rammed him. I mean, just head on, like that's one of the techniques, of spies is they know how to have car wrecks and injure people. So anyway, I was joking that Ingrid had to use his flying saucer since his Volkswagen had been hit by the truck. But it makes you wonder, this place 2 miles west, it could have been near where Walter Bosley lived. Bosley's a guy with a military intelligence, from a military intelligence family who's sort of been poking around in the Mothman story. He's saying that they lived, a mile or so away from the site where all this took place. And his dad Bosley's dad was in, I think it was naval intelligence at the time. And so, and then they left right after the Mothman, the Silver Bridge collapse. And Bosley's, in the field today, making different claims. None of which really I can remember right now, but it's kind of odd. It's kind of odd, and this accident looks like it may have been right where he was living. Anyway, there's a picture of a guy in this article that looks very similar to the Indrid Cold drawings. There's a couple of drawings out there that people who had seen him made, and they're saying that this picture was shot in '78. So it makes you wonder if Indrid Cold was still there, and that's what I've heard, is that he was there for several years afterward. And I'm gonna post this to the blog today, so people can see this face. It's a very interesting. It's a very distinct face. And it's not, it's strange how they don't name who these people are in the article. It's almost like they're wanting to print his picture without saying that it's him, thus getting themselves into hot water. But we may have an image here of Indrid Cold, I guess is the point of this. Back to the calendar. One of the things I mentioned in March, or forgot to mention in March, was these man-bat sightings that they had in Mexico. Those started in early March, and they kept on going, but they weren't brought to the media's attention until the second week of April, which is where we left off in our calendar. Mm-hmm. So in April, second week of April, suddenly they start talking about this Mexican man-bat. People start claiming that it is that the man-bat has been conjured up somehow via some occult activity, and that the man-bat is killing animals, because they often will find dead animals at the same time some of these creatures are seen. But it may not be, that's a specious line of reasoning, because it could be that the creatures are appearing in order to counteract somehow the killing of the animals. Because one of the ways that you would conjure up anything would be to kill animals in a ritualistic way, like some of these occult groups are said to do. And it could be that, while that may conjure up an animal, animal A may not be a man-bat. Animal B may be the man-bat. The man-bat may be a response to evil, what you could label evil, quote, activity. But the articles always play up the fear side of the equation, even though if you look closely at the testimony of the people that saw the man-bat, in this case, they weren't afraid, and they actually felt like it was some sort of benevolent being. But the newspapers, try to make it into something scary and negative.
That's why we love them.
Yeah. So I guess we sort of left off second week of April there.
Well, the Ides of April are always interesting.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, what happened in the Ides of April is they started all this pirate stuff.
Yeah.
The pirate stuff, and this dovetailed exactly with a book that a lady wrote about the oil industry and how they had been focusing in the last few years on raising prices using the excuses that revolve around domestic distribution of oil within the borders of the United States. So they were, tinkering with all that to keep the prices up, and then she was saying that they were shifting now to the international distribution area to keep the prices up. because obviously, people can't afford it, aren't going to be buying enough here to keep the price up, or whatever, assuming that has anything to do with the price. But, so you immediately started seeing these incidents which, quote, threatened, shipping.
Well, you know what bothered me about that, and perhaps you don't, but I'll tell you anyway. After a while, if this is going to be an entrenched problem, what I'm thinking about is, regardless where the United States or whatever nation has a battle carrier group out there somewhere, you have satellites. I mean, you don't have to be stationed in in all this. They kept saying, well, the area is so massive, how are you going to know? Well, look, they're coming out of a certain place. I mean, that's all where they're coming out of, Somalia, right? And the other thing is, if you got a bird that's on them, if you see something happening, why not send out a couple of fighters? Well,
why not just shoot them with a drone missile, which is what they're doing in Pakistan all the time now.
Or outfit the ships. Yeah, okay, duh. So, it's like, why is this such an insoluble problem? Because I understand the way they break it down to us, again, the news media giving us anything but the truth. Why, it's such a massive... We don't need surface vessels trying to catch them. All you got to do is take a look at them from an eye in the sky, send out a couple of F-16s or whatever, and bang, you're dead. Out. Goodbye. That'll do it. So, I don't know. But anyway, and then it disappears. It's like we used to kid around back in 2000 that the only good thing that came out of 9/11 was it apparently stopped SUV rollovers and Goodyear tire problems. And I'm saying this sarcastically, Andy, but it was like we heard nothing except, if you can think back then, you remember it was a big thing about SUV rollovers, and Ford was blaming Goodyear and Goodyear's tires, and
right.
And then somehow after 9/11 it all stopped. And the other thing that stopped too, shark attacks in Florida. Suddenly no more in the news. Now, yes, my tongue is firmly planted in my... This is the truth, though. I mean, that's exactly what happened. But my tongue is planted into my cheek saying, okay, so now, as we speak, are there no more Somali pilots skipping around the Indian Ocean? Jeez.
Yeah. Well, or maybe they were shot down. They could shoot these pirates with some kind of infrasonic sound weapon. This morning I randomly did my random opening of a book, and it was a Secret and Suppressed 2 book, which there's an article in there by Joseph Farrell, and he's sort of keying off of an article that was in the Secret and Suppressed 1 book, having to do with Otto Skorzeny and Nazi International. And Farrell actually quotes, he quotes some material in there about how Nazi Germany had built a sound weapon. It looked a lot like Wilhelm Reich's, cloud-busting machine. But this was something that was developed long ago and simply could be pointed at any, that was a sound weapon, but they also could just point an electromagnetic weapon, such as Marconi's weapon, that would just shut down the engine of any vehicle, so that you could point that at a plane or a boat and just make it die right there. Speaking of this total tangent here, but Marconi's was covered in that RAI special about Mothman, 911, Mothman, Marconi, and Marilyn Monroe. Marconi, according to Al Bielek, who I don't, believe, but I don't believe at least the parts that he wants you to believe, I don't believe, which is that he was a time traveler. But he was talking about Marconi's company being a spy cover company, that there were spies in the company. And interestingly, Bielek, in his very first talk about all of his whole story, was this back in when was that? I think it was in the late 80s. Tim Beckley was the guy that introduced Bielek sort of to the world and had him speak at a conference. And Bielek gets up and says, "Oh, this is my first talk ever on this subject. I don't know what I'm going to say, blah, blah, blah. But then he gives this totally polished talk about, Montauk and all the mind control and time travel and all that, and started this huge ball rolling that's continuing to roll today, that all this time travel stuff is going on, which is really the least probable, the hardest thing to believe about the whole Montauk story. So they take the least believable thing and sort of amp it up. Anyway, back to April. So in that third week of April, a lot of stuff was going well. In the second week, by the way, they had supposedly our electrical grid was being hacked by someone on the 8th, April 8th. And then Iran charged a journalist with spying. The Somali pilots, struck that day. There was a shooting at a Korean retreat center in California the day before. Just a bunch of different things that are all provocative in their own right, and they just sort of suddenly all happened together. Riots began in Thailand on the 13th. On the 14th, some more Somali ships, or pirates hijacked some more ships. There was a guy named John Demjanjuk who...
Who got he had been extradited, wasn't he, to Germany?
Yeah, and he was taken from Seven Hills, Ohio. He was living in Ohio, so there's an example of a Nazi living in Ohio who was, at least important enough that they wanted to take him back. So some of the North Korea stuff was starting up then. They just, as soon as Obama was installed and, starting to get things rolling, they had to get the threats up, the threats so that Obama, because he, was campaigning less as a hawk, and more as a reformer, they had to amp up these threats so that he could then, plausibly go after, whoever. And it's really ridiculous what they're doing right now. They're, literally just using drone weapons to bomb Pakistan and Afghanistan. And one wonders, what the overall plan is over there. Is it just the protection of the drug trade?
It's target
Is
practice.
it making space for the new Israel?
Nah. It's target practice. I'm telling you, they're trying everything out for the next one.
Yeah. On the 15th, Air America, some of the documents about the Air America program are released, and this is, I've read different accounts of what all was going on with Air America, but the one that always sort of sticks in my mind is that Pepsi was running a factory over there in Asia that was actually churning out heroin, and then they were shipping the heroin back, in the bodies of dead, soldiers.
Yeah, that's right. In Vietnam, they were stuffing the drugs in their body cavities. Isn't that great? Listen, I had somebody tell me after hearing us talk about this. We did this on the show years ago. I don't know why this person did that, because you got to be careful when you say this stuff. But the individual was in line at some eatery or something like that. I guess it was a takeout. I don't remember. And struck up a conversation with a guy that apparently was a Vietnam vet, and just tossed this out, which I would not have done. And the guy said, "Yeah, you're right, absolutely. I didn't think anybody knew that. Blah blah blah." And, so there you go.
Yeah. On the 14th, there was a story about a mysterious light coming in from a black hole. So you often have these paranormal-ish kind of stories tossed in, and when people hear that, they see a vision of a big black hole and a mysterious light, and then it just, who knows if that's some sort of hypnotic programming on a mass scale or what, but it's strange how there's always these mystery stories about what's happening in outer space.
By the way, I have to tell you, because you reminded me, and I took a look. Referring back to our first show, the first part,
Uh-huh.
I told you about the lights in South America?
Yeah.
All right. What it is it is the island of Colares, Colares, off the north, I believe, eastern coast of Brazil, that began to experience UFO lights. And it began in August 1977, and I'm hoping Elvis's death didn't have anything to do with it.
Yes.
But at any rate, you can read about this on UFOcasebook.com, and then do a /Colares 1977.html, and you will get there. So anyway, Andy, I did find it, and that's what it was about. It was a pretty decent documentary too. So anyway, I know you just reminded me. It's out. It's done. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to roll through April here in one swoop, and then we can talk about anything. Is that all right?
Well, what happened to May and June?
No. I just want to get through April.
But you have May and June, right?
Yeah, they weren't as active, so those won't take long.
But all right, yes. But I mean, I don't mind spending a little time on April only because it has been an active month. But this year, as far as brushes with groups in the government, it was not the case. I think everybody's expecting things to happen in the Ides of April, and I mean that, from the 15th to the 19th, because of Hitler's birthday and the Murrah building situation and blah, blah, blah. We all know about that. And of course, it's tax day and that kind of crap. But it doesn't seem to happen because everybody's expecting things to happen during the Ides. And I think it more or less is slowing down. So, by the way, when did that may have been later too. Do you have anything about the fact that, I don't know, somebody in the government was popping off about militant white supremacist groups or patriots or something like that being terrorists and all this crap?
Yeah, they definitely started that up again, and that usually happens when a Democrat's in office.
Okay. Now, do you know when that happened with regard to April, May, and June? Did that happen in April also, or did it happen in May? Or do you not have that down on the timeline?
Yeah, I didn't really do that. It sort of started early on. When Obama, got going. I can't remember, but yeah, I would say March probably.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. April.
Yeah, April 15th, there was a Cleopatra tomb story. So they were searching her tomb, or had found it. So that's a Masonic, tinge story. We're still messing around in Thailand by the end of the week on the 17th. An assassination attempt in Thailand. There's an earthquake in Afghanistan. There's several earthquakes that month. The U.S. and Japan give $1 billion to Pakistan. So it's kind of interesting. It's like we're giving them $1 billion and then we're bombing parts of their country.
Well, how are they going to get built up if we don't help them? It's the Marshall Plan over and over and over.
There was a Long Beach hospital shooting on the 17th. And also they found skinned coyotes in the Columbus area, Columbus, Ohio. That article came out that day. So one wonders, if these are people that are trying to become skinwalkers by, skinning the coyotes and then wearing the skins.
Where in Ohio? Near Columbus?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you might, you expect this maybe out in the Four Corners area, but why in Ohio? Well, because there's a lot of occultists there. And there's also a lot of military occultists, one would imagine.
Well, I mean, let me ask you this. I mean, in that area, maybe in the Appalachians, as it is in Vermont, in their part of the Appalachian chain, I mean, we knew of coy dogs, not coyotes. But, I mean, are these people who might have brought them in from somewhere else? I mean, are true coyotes endemic to that area?
I don't know if they're true coyotes, but yeah, there's coyotes.
All right.
There, yeah. There were a few things that weekend, various shootings and things happening here in the States. And then at the beginning of the the anniversary of Columbine, of course, was the 10th anniversary was on the 19th, and then that following week you saw a lot of things. You immediately saw Ahmadinejad making anti-Israeli comments at the UN on the 20th. It's supposed to be Holocaust Remembrance Day, and so he immediately stirs things up. We found out on the 20th that the U.S. had waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed 183 times in order to extract, he ended up
confessing to
that
anything.
He was mastermind.
He probably has gills now. What a garbage.
So that they could get, false
just tell me
information linking Saddam Hussein to 911.
Amelia Earhart, Marilyn Monroe. And
a Jamaican airliner was hijacked on the 20th, which probably, kind of makes you think of the Nazi International, because they're the guys that supposedly set these hijackings up. Obama shook Chavez's hand, and Newt Gingrich got all upset about that on the 20th. We found out that there's drugs. I guess it was another story, or was it the first story, about the drugs in our water? How many prescription drugs have made their way into our water?
What a supply, I know.
So they're really hitting us with a bunch of stuff on the 20th. The 21st, it's the same. It just keeps on going. The 21st, we found out that the banks were going to stop. It weren't lending money. The money that they had gotten from the bailout just wasn't finding its way into anyone's mortgages. Obama opened his torture probe that day. They found an Earth-like planet right outside of our solar system on the 21st. So that's another planet that's been discovered. Is that like number 18 or something?
I don't know.
The Craigslist killer came into the news. On the 22nd, we had the Freddie Mac CFO executive dude suicide. Yeah.
And you know what? I don't know about you, but I thought that they got rid of that real quick.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, no conspiracy. He's dead. I don't know. I just thought that they treated that like, okay, he's gone, and now the sports.
Yeah. Just as Obama's opening his torture probe the day before, then we suddenly hear that the Taliban is tightening their grip over Afghanistan. So they're building up to these incursions. We just had a surge this week in Afghanistan. U.S. surge. We also started hearing, the SERE, S-E-R-E, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape program of the navies, where they waterboard their own people, came online. So everybody's arguing about waterboarding. But strangely, so you've got some build-up going here where some issues are being talked about. Like we had Jesse Ventura on The View, going after, arguing, strongly that waterboarding should not be something that we should be doing because it's going to come back to haunt us. And by the way, waterboarding goes back all the way back to the colonial days. I saw a drawing from a cartoon from the turn of the century.
Let me guess.
Early 1900s, where they were waterboarding an Indian.
And who was doing that? The Brits or us?
Well, it was like a Union soldier waterboarding an Indian, and some joke was made about it. And they claim this started back with the Japanese, but it must go back into antiquity.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, on the 23rd, they start the whole Susan Boyle thing, the singer from Britain. So they give you a bunch of, there's been some things revealed, that they waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed 183 times. That sort of discussion is going on, and suddenly you have this singer in Britain who's really, frumpy, but yet she can sing great, and so she stayed in the media, she stayed in the news for a long time and drowned out a lot of other stories.
She reminds me of Newt Gingrich with a perm.
She does look like him.
He does, I know. And he's another one of his illegitimate children, no doubt. Anyway.
Well, but you know, they didn't stop this. They didn't stop their stuff, because on the 24th you got more things. You got these plane provocations. You got a plane that mysteriously appears in Washington D.C. airspace, and then there was another one the following Monday in New York.
Oh, you mean
yeah.
bringing Air Force One or a Air Force One fleet craft? Yeah. I mean, what are they thinking about? Honest to goodness, that is dumb as dirt.
I think it's clearly to allude to terrorism.
To ramp it up.
Yeah.
Well, you know how I knew it was bogus?
How?
Because they actually had F-16s guiding it. Because of 9/11, there wasn't anything around. Well, you know what I mean? What a joke. Of course it isn't a terror event. You got F-16s up there with them, the way it should be, except for that day in September.
Yeah. On the 24th, you've got Saberi, the U.S. journalist who's probably a spy, on a hunger strike in an Iranian prison. You've got GM threatening shutdowns unless they get $2 more billion in bailout money. You've got an earthquake in the Gallipolis area, believe it or not, Point Pleasant. There was an earthquake on the 24th on the Ohio-West Virginia border, right near Point Pleasant.
How do the natives pronounce that town's name?
Gallipolis.
Okay, I always thought it was Gallipolis, but okay. One of my favorite towns. That's off my must-see list, along with Mason, West Virginia, which I told you about.
Yeah. On the 25th, guess what? We have our swine flu outbreak.
Swine boo.
Swine flu began. On the 26th, an earthquake in Mexico City. On the 27th, a fighter jet circles the Empire State Building. Or I don't know if that's just the Air Force One thing or not. Is that something else?
Oh, I don't know.
GM announces 21,000 jobs are being cut. On the 28th, a study finds that skinny people are scared by sounds more easily. So does that mean that they're going... I mean, what are they going to do with that information? Try to get people to lose weight so that we can be terrorized more easily?
Or have them go ahead and get heavier so they wouldn't have to worry about that crap anymore. Don't you
an ice shelf broke off on the 28th.
Who?
A huge ice shelf. And those stories get a lot of mileage, making people afraid of global warming, which, you know, I just recently heard this theory that global warming is caused by the contrails, that the chemtrails are being put up to increase heat by trapping heat with whatever molecules they're spreading. It seems like it would be hard to do.
Yes, I think
over such a large area. But you never know, because the ionosphere works in such a way that particles tend to drift together into fine layers.
Well,
and they find their place in this whole progression of layers, and it could be that a very thin layer of something could be put up there, I guess. Well, theoretically.
Remember something now. This was actually talked about by the Air Force, and this is back in around 2001 or 2. Maybe a little even earlier. It might have been there before I came upon it, where they willingly admitted that they were making basically a screen, if you would. They metallicized space or a certain level of the atmosphere to bounce RF off them, radio wave transmission. All right, it's like, okay, and all this other stuff. The other thing was, well, we can modify wet weather and make it rain on the enemy, blah, blah, blah. So and then all of a sudden all that stuff went away. And nobody wanted to talk about it at all. Trudeau was saying once that when he was looking, I guess, on global satellites or whatever, he said, it's not across the whole world. It seems to be in certain areas that you would necessarily equate with the good guys, in the global battle between good guys and bad guys, which would be the northern hemisphere, or North America rather, in the Western Hemisphere, and also Western Europe. Now, I don't know. I mean, does this stuff float? I mean, I don't know how you can keep it pinned on top of a certain particular geographical area unless you have to do, a 360. I don't know. I don't think that it's out there to make us sick. I think that our getting sick off that is a collateral damage to the military. So, obviously it's being done for a reason. They don't want to talk about it at all anymore. Trudeau thought that it might be possibly a shield to prevent an EMP or whatever from knocking out the grid, which makes a certain amount of sense. I don't know how much, I don't know how they behave, the contrail masses. If it's, I don't know. But if it were a shield for an upcoming conflict, that kind of does make sense. And then the fact that people shouldn't be breathing titanium and barium and such is not a good thing, but I don't think it's for our extermination. Whoever craps because of it, that's the way it goes according to the military. But I think it's more military than anything else. I mean, I don't know. Doesn't that strike you as a military thing?
Yeah. There could be some sort of mapping capabilities to it, too, depending on how the particles are dispersed. You could perhaps even leave tracers on. If it's being used to bounce signals, there might be a way to even identify where signals came from based on some sort of signature that's applied at the place where it's bounced off of the ionosphere. Sort of similar to how they put when you buy explosives, they put these little tags in there. You can only see them under a microscope, but there's these little identifiers that they put in the explosives so that if you blow something up, they're called taggets, I think. And
so they can trace back where the purchase was?
Yeah, there was a West Virginia case where a guy had bought some dynamite in West Virginia and then killed his nephew, and then they were able to find out where the stuff was purchased, and then they looked at the log of the guy who had sold it and saw the name of one of their suspects in there. And interestingly, that was a program that was started sometime, I can't remember if it was the 80s or 90s, but there was a program in place to have this mandatory tagging going on with all explosives. And lo and behold, it was withdrawn. And I saw, an episode of this on Forensic Files, and the police guys are saying, it's really weird that they took that away, because that could have allowed us to solve so many different bombing cases if we had this tag in there.
Bingo.
Yeah, bingo. They took them out in order to facilitate terrorism.
Sure. Well, who do you think's perpetrating terrorism on us except our own? So, there's a lot of law enforcement has no idea this is going on, but there's a whole bunch of black bag people out there that operate on another whole level. So, it doesn't surprise me. And by the way, wasn't that like those rocket kids back in the 50s from West Virginia?
Mm-hmm.
And didn't they go on to NASA, some of them?
Yeah.
Did you ever hear that locally, like when you were growing up, that took place in West Virginia? Or is that something you had to watch a movie about to find out about?
No, it was known. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it just lends to the legend of West Virginia.
Yeah.
I wonder what state holds the record for most of its population being on Jerry Springer. It's got to be close between Kentucky and West Virginia.
I don't know.
I know. Well, curious minds want to know. All right, moving on.
I know that Kentucky was considered by the Indians to be the place where some large white people were living, who were thought to be from Europe by the Indians, thought to be from across the ocean, and I'm trying to remember the name of the chief. There's a quote from one of the chiefs who said, we do not go into Kentucky, because I think Lord Dunmore, one of the Brits, was trying to negotiate, how do we buy Kentucky from the Indians? And the Indians were like, well,
Why don't you just take it?
Yeah, because the souls of these dead Europeans are there everywhere, and we only go in there to hunt, and we always ask permission from the spirits there.
Well, isn't that where Lincoln came from? Was he not born in Kentucky?
Yes.
And what was he? And was he inordinately tall at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was tall. Yes.
And then some people have him as being part black. Some people have him being Jewish. I don't know, whatever. But the guy was big and he came from Kentucky.
Well, the guy who turned the entire nation onto LSD, Owsley, was from Kentucky. He was from an old Kentucky family. I think his grandfather had been governor.
Oh, good old Owsley. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was friends with Manson, supposedly.
Yeah, and then he was also a principal in the entourage around the Grateful Dead. Do I have that right? I believe I do.
I think so.
Yeah.
Finishing up April, though, Chrysler started going bankrupt on the 30th. On the 1st of May, we had NATO had another Somali hijacking. Dynamite was seized. So it started to seem like they were going to build it up into more of a terrorism thing. Because it was kind of ridiculous. At first, it's just guys in one little boat. And never did. So I think they started to introduce the dynamite thing to make it seem more plausible. But then the whole thing just sort of disappeared. On the 2nd of May, there was a story about birds being able to dance. I like bird stories because of the symbolisms.
Oh, yeah, I saw they had a bunch of cockatiels rocking out, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On the 5th of May, the U.S. bombed Afghanistan, so we really started going in there. And then we had a supposed Taliban offensive in Pakistan, which was probably CIA up to something there. Bank of America starts going bankrupt on the 6th. On the 7th, the Barker Ranch where Manson lived burned down in California out there in the desert. And I recently heard that there's been a program put on by the Navy for quite a while where they go in. They've been going into this because that's right next to that base, the one that Harriet's aunt was head of for a while, China Lake. Right next to China Lake, the Navy's been going in and spraying some chemical on everywhere, and then setting the landscape on fire to clear out brush. And was there some other reason for that?
Yeah, and incriminating evidence.
And incriminating evidence. I forget what the chemical is called, but that's what Adam Gorightly heard from one of the locals. And so one would imagine that was caused by that. And then the next day you have these big wildfires in Santa Barbara again. Like every year there's wildfires in Santa Barbara, and they always seem to come around. The timing is a little suspicious. I mean, it's hard to...
Yeah, but are you hit with the Santa Anas at that time? Are they hit with that at that time?
I don't know.
All right, because, I mean, obviously there are some things that are, I think, coincidental or caused by whatever. I mean, but I don't know if the Santa Anas hit at certain times, and if that's one of them.
Let's type it in.
Okay. We'll play some Jeopardy music while you do that. All right, but I want to tell everybody that we're talking with Andrew Colvin, like you didn't know, and also you can check out the other link with his involvement with the Forteans West. Also, I just want to make a shameless plug and remind you folks that if you go to thinkorbeaten.com, you'll find there Angie's blog spot, pbs.blogspot.com. You will also find Volume 3 of the Grassy Knoll Archives. We're going A to Z from the very beginning of the show onward. And you got these shows, but there's also a store there. And there are items there that are kind of funky that Angie has developed. I purchased a bunch myself. Those funds go to Angie for the work she does. And she's a pretty good designer. And we're going to come up with a second volume of Inside the Grassy Knoll very shortly. So please take a look at that and take a look at some of the items. Like I said, I got nothing to do with it except that I like them and I bought some for myself. And also we have the closeout on the Grassy Knoll shirts, of which Andy Colvin is a owner of 8 of them. And where might they be now, Andy?
I have handed about half of those out already to people that really like them.
So who knows how many fistfights will be created?
Well, I wore mine last night to a street fair, and I did get a couple of people coming up and saying that they really liked the shirt.
Well, honestly, what's on the back is something, I mean, that I came up with mainly, because let's face it, all this, it is a conspiracy. Enough said. So anyway, at least you didn't get knifed or punched out by some dock worker. Or...
Yeah, the cops didn't bug me.
All right, I'm not doing my job then.
Yeah.
Right, go ahead.
It says here the Santa Ana winds come in the fall, so these
so it would not fall
fires would not be caused by that. On May 10th, we had the SLA's James Kilgore released from prison. A lot of these SLA people, like Sarah Jane Moore and so forth, have been getting released.
Well, Moore was in SLA though, was she?
Well, she was helping them.
Oh no, wait a minute. So we got Moore being part of. Wasn't she actually on the periphery or part of the Manson posse?
No, well, she knew Squeaky, and
Squeaky's the first failed assassin of Gerald Ford. Moore's the second failed assassin of Gerald Ford. Yeah,
and Squeaky took pot shots 17 days before Moore, so that's kind of a Masonic number that I noted. And I noted that when Moore recently was on Matt Lauer,
I saw that. Go ahead.
They flashed her picture from when she was arrested, and the numbers under her name were 07-17-77 or 7-17-77. I can't remember exactly.
She was ugly back then too.
Yeah, but the numbers, are Masonically tinged simply in her police picture.
So in other words, she may have come about this from the Symbionese Liberation Army aspect.
Yeah, well, she was being asked to inform on them by the FBI. So she was, hanging out with them. And this is all very mysterious. We know very little about what she was doing. And I just purchased that book about her, written by Jerry Spieler, which finally did come out. And so I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm going to read it and see if we can find out anything more about what she was really up to. One of the things she was up to was being the bookkeeper for people in need, which was Randolph Hearst's program to distribute the food so that he could get his daughter back. So this puts Sarah Jane in an important position. Why? Because Jim Jones's church was helping with people in need. And Jim Jones they were, I think, making the food, some of the food, for people in need. And then they were double billing it. They were taking the food. Let me see, how does this work? Okay, they were handing the food off of a truck. So, Jonestown people make the food, they give it to Sarah Jane, she tallies it up, it goes off of the truck to somebody in the street, but that somebody in the street is really an agent for Jonestown, the church, and then they come back and hand the same plate of food back to Sarah Jane and her people a few minutes later, saying that it's coming in from headquarters. And I can't remember the source for this. It may have been John Judge, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
But that was the story. So she probably knew what was going on there, one would imagine.
Let me ask you this. Now, did you watch the interview between her and Matt Lauer?
I did.
Would you just tell me what you thought about her demeanor and what she said, what her overall presence during that interview? Would you typify that?
She a couple of times said that she didn't know why she was there, how she got there, that she was unduly influenced. I mean, I think she's trying to tell us that she was
a tool.
A tool, yeah.
Yeah. What did you think about when Maddie Honey was pressing her about being released, even though she was the alleged assassin of a president? You remember that at all, Andy? I do, but I mean, did that strike you?
Yeah. What did you think? I don't remember really.
I thought she was very taciturn during the whole interview. I would say whether this happened since her incarceration or whatever, this woman possesses a decent intellect. And now a certain presence also, being on the Today Show after being released from the joint. And he kept pressing. He's going, look, I did the time proscribed within the parameters of the judicial system. I did my time. I'm done. Well, don't you think? I did my time. I'm done. If you get a problem with the penalty, go take it up with them. I don't know. I would have loved, and in fact, when I saw that, I thought of you, and I'm like, man, you know, what is going on here? Because there's a whole bunch of subtextual stuff going down. And I just like the way she handled herself. You know, I mean.
You liked it?
I like the way she handled herself because, I mean, basically, Matt, what do you want to say? Okay, Sarah, don't you think you should be in prison forever?
Right.
You know, and she's like, you know, jam it, Matt. I mean, that's the way I'm seeing it, right? Jam it, Matt. That's it. I did my time. I'm out. Okay.
Yeah, and she, you know, the funny thing was that she's from West Virginia, and yet she says that her reasoning for getting involved with the SLA and for eventually shooting at Ford is that she had never seen poverty like that she was seeing in the San Francisco area.
Yeah, but now, wasn't she originally incarcerated in West Virginia and she busted out?
Yeah.
And who else? Who else was incarcerated there at the same time? Was Fromm there too? Which wouldn't make any sense in a way.
I think they were at one time.
In some penal institution in West Virginia, if you go to Wikipedia, because I think they basically suck too, but you'll find some stuff that they can't screw up. I mean, it just gives you dates and facts. But I was surprised because it seemed like more than one person busted out of that place in West Virginia, and they finally had to bring her somewhere else. So there again, you wonder, you know, how did she have the wherewithal to break out? You know, there's a lot going on there, right? I mean, that's got to be. I wouldn't mind being like stuck in an elevator with her for a half hour.
Well, I did some research on the Kahn family. Well, I don't know which Kahn branch she's from, but they appear to be a Cincinnati family that got into meats, big meat packing family, and they were eventually bought out by Sarah Lee, I think.
Oh, that's getting too close. Sarah Jane and Sarah Lee, that's great.
Yeah, again, I don't know if she's from the Kahn Meats family, but that was the only Kahn name that was in my town.
And the Kahn we're talking about is Kahn, which we're known for hot dogs.
Yeah, and that was, and there was a meat distributorship like a block from her house. There wasn't a Kahn. Well, they probably had Kahn Meats there, but it wasn't specifically a Kahn meat place.
Right.
But made me think that maybe she was from that family. And if she is, then that may be a connection of some kind to Manson, because Manson was born in Cincinnati.
You know, Cincinnati has got to be the mothership for all the strangeness that takes place in a certain circumference of the Ohio Valley. Cincinnati is really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's the Masonic, the Masonic capital almost, and of course you've got all the gambling that was going on right across the river.
Yeah, and the Golden Circle were big there. I mean, it's almost not like a northern town. Would you agree?
It's a German town.
Oh, that explains it.
Getting back to the calendar, I'd like to knock off May and June because there wasn't a whole lot. We found out on the 13th of May that the swine flu had sort of jumped in. That it started from a Tamiflu lab.
Oh, jeez.
At least that was what one guy was saying, and that would link, of course, to Rumsfeld. Well, he's a big investor in Tamiflu.
Well, create the problem and create the solution.
On the 13th, we also had another Montauk monster wash up on the shores of Montauk, and then in a really strange thing, suddenly we also had a Montauk toast that went up on eBay. You remember we had the Jesus toast that one of the Mothman, I guess, experiencers, you could call her, was trying to sell way back when. And now we have a Montauk. As soon as this second Montauk monster was photographed and the image was up, then suddenly you have someone making toast that looks just like it. It's almost like there's people out there that just spend their time trying to create these pieces of toast that look like other stuff and selling them.
No.
Well, that was what I thought from the beginning with the Jesus Toast lady. I was like, that's just too, she had done so many other things to get attention, or seemingly, strange events were always happening to her. It just seemed to be too much, and then suddenly she's got this toast with Jesus' face on it, and it makes you wonder if there's like a personality type out there.
Of course there is.
Yeah, cooks up stuff. And
yeah,
supposedly Sarah Jane Moore is one of these. She's been, described as someone who's a media hound, who's always trying to get attention, and you could kind of sense that when she was on Matt Lyer, that she was very satisfied that she finally had made it, to a national program.
But I mean,
anyway,
you're still incarcerated, and that isn't like a great thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's something, huh?
I didn't mean to go back to her.
Yeah, and you don't want me getting off on that again. So,
yeah.
Well, let me rephrase that. You don't want me going back and talking about her. But I tell you what, we have to get her address so we can get her on.
Yeah, we do. We'd like to know where she is.
Yeah, and also, last thing, I swear to God, I won't say anything more. But I'm sorry, another pun. I didn't mean it. What happens to these people after they fall out of the public eye, which could be a more dangerous time for them if they've been a tool than when they were in prison or in the height of everything. And I'm being serious as a heart attack about that. I'm wondering if she'll have some fate befall her in the next year.
Oh yeah. On the 13th, we also had the Taliban attacking the Pakistani army, so you could call that a U.S. surge, and it's kind of interesting that happens on the same day as the swine flu potential release of information that the swine flu was a concoction. And then there was also a suicide of some guy named Ibn al-Libi, who, pardon me for not remembering exactly what his role was, but it had something to do with 911.
Libby?
I think. On the 14th, they found a 35,000-year-old carving in Germany, supposedly of a human body, proving that we were at least, 35,000 years old.
I feel like that every day.
We had Chrysler and GM dealership cuts coming in that day. Obama revives terror tribunals on the 15th, so he's continuing everything that had been started up by Bush. We're starting to get a clear idea at this point that Obama is not going to do anything.
Same old, man. And tribunals will become the jurisprudence system for you and me and everyone else. And that's what we're headed for. So. And
on that same day, Cheney, starts claiming that the Gitmo detainees, revealed the Iraq Al-Qaeda link.
Right. Okay.
So he and Obama were synced up. A week passes without much. Suddenly you have that fake plot in New York where the guys were going to shoot down a plane and bomb a Jewish temple on the 21st, and then they also on that day voted not to close down Gitmo. There was a shooting in Georgia.
Well, that's every day.
Yeah. Suicide bombings in Baghdad every day. Concealed guns on Texas university campuses were okayed.
By my videos.
On the 22nd, we have a story that the Tasmanian devil carries a contagious cancer. And this should remind everyone that cancer is a virus, because otherwise, how could you have a contagious cancer?
Well, you have no argument here. I just wondered if Warner Brothers is aware of that.
On the 25th, we have a North Korean nuke test and a Starbucks bombing in New York City. Sarah Jane Moore was on the Today Show on the 28th, and a new laser is unveiled at Lawrence Livermore on the 30th. In June, we have the abortion doctor shot on the 1st. An Airbus plane goes down over the Atlantic, flying to Paris from Rio.
And one other thing about that, and there's all kinds of stories that flew around that, okay, but it seems that there was a breakup midair, and I don't think anybody's getting really decent information about why that would be.
Yes, it does seem to be that kind of same scenario.
From talking to the two pilots with whom I'm familiar, one very much so, taking a lightning strike is a dangerous thing for planes, and the Airbus is fly-by-wire. It's completely electronic. It has no hydraulics. That's why Sully was very fortunate up in New York for having lost everything he lost, because there isn't a whole lot of this. I don't think there's any hydraulics there whatsoever, so time was of a factor. Be that as it may, without going into the whole 9 yards, that was a very fortuitous situation if those folks had to have a landing and incur that problem. But lightning causing a breakup, I don't think that is the case. It would do a lot of other damage to an Airbus, but so what's with the breakup? And all of a sudden that story's gone cold, don't you think?
It seems to, yeah.
So anyway.
It sounds like behind-the-scenes battling over contracts.
Well, certainly the Airbus hasn't had a lot of great PR lately.
Well, yeah, but they do make, if you've flown on an Airbus, they're nicer. There's plenty of room. They're designed well. I like them. And I think that, somebody over here doesn't, perhaps it's Boeing. I don't know.
Well, you'll always have, I don't see that the aviation industry wants to go totally to all electronics in what Airbus has. I think I would rather not have that happen. The fact that Airbus built what they built, it's got to certainly be more comfortable for people, especially across long hauls. That would be transatlantic and such, no doubt about it. I just don't know that if something goes wrong, you want everything based on electronics. So, but whatever it is, certainly, I think most pilots are more comfortable with what's being manufactured by Boeing.
Okay. On the 3rd, we had a UFO fleet seen over Cambridgeshire, England. 50 at least UFOs flying together. It's an interesting video. Some nuke plants were released. Locations of nuclear plants was released to the internet on the 2nd. David Carradine was found hanged on the 4th.
That's another story that's gone cold. Was it really a suicide? I don't know.
Well, I know a friend who lives in L.A. who saw him standing in the road a year ago or so, in the rain, just standing in the middle of traffic. Saw David Carradine, like on Sunset Boulevard. So I don't know if that
has any bearing, right? But
if David was doing drugs or something.
Well, for somebody who's supposed to be so in tune and in touch and with the whole thing, I thought he probably had fried a certain part of his brain.
Yeah, he's known to have done a lot of drugs, so maybe it took
caught up
toll, or who knows.
Now, where did that happen? Was that in Thailand as well?
Yeah, Bangkok.
Thailand, they got some problems there.
Yeah, and they had a lot of unrest in the previous month
yes,
or two,
they did.
so
Yeah.
Who knows if it's what was going on there. In the movie industry, there's a lot of shady characters, and there's, people get vendettas going. And
well, don't they do a lot of, child porn movies there?
Yeah, it's known for
Yeah,
prostitution.
and also young prostitution.
Yeah.
Now, we had an Anglo who had married a Thai and opened up a restaurant not far from where I live, and it was great. In fact, they were one of the sponsors of our old shows. You'll hear promos to a great Thai restaurant. But, man, I mean, and they both went back. I mean, that was his goal, to make a certain amount of money and go to Thailand. And he used to regale me with stories about going over there and availing himself of teenage girls. And I'm like, oh, man, don't tell me this stuff. So I looked at him when he told me he was going to go over. I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, as long as everything's peaceable, round eye will be okay. But, man, if they ever throw any kind of coup over there, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. So I don't even know if he's dead now. But anyway.
Right.
Nice little details for you.
On the 11th, we had the Holocaust Museum shooting in D.C., which is another provocation, one would say, toward making people think that the Patriot movement or the militia movement's alive and well. On the 12th, we had the Iran election fiasco, where, clearly the CIA's in there trying to mess with, depose Ahmadinejad and get the Shah's son back in.
Are they going for another? Are you serious? They want to get Shah's son in?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, God. That ain't going to work. Okay.
The Republicans, yeah. North Korea said they were going to weaponize their nukes on the 13th. AIG refused to pay out for the Hudson River plane crash. Remember that one where the guy landed on the river?
Yep, and that's ongoing. That's right. They don't want to do it.
After AIG,
duped all their mucky mucks with a nice bonus, which yeah, you gotta love that.
On the 23rd, you had that shooting of Nida in Iran, the woman who had nothing to do with any protests or anything, shot mysteriously while someone was filming it.
Gee,
the whole thing
that couldn't have our hand in that, could it?
It seems like it could be a CIA thing all you need is one incident against a woman in one of these situations, and then you have all of the progressives in America on your side. So, there almost is a motive for concocting any kind of,
All right, but let me interject at this point. I don't think I say the legislation anymore. To take a look on thomas.loc.gov will take some time. I think I could find it. What struck me very interestingly was before any bombs fell in Iraq, which would have been in early 2003, there was legislation on the Hill that suggested we might have to, and excuse my colloquialisms, smack Iran around for the treatment of their women, blah, blah, blah. I kid you not. If I can find the House resolution, I'll get it up. I'll have to take a look. So what I'm thinking to myself...
You mean the one... Are you talking about the one that allows Afghani men to demand sex?
Oh, no. This was strictly... Go figure. Those idiots, in the District of Criminals, making a resolution that, we might have to, get a little firm with Iran for what they do over there and also with their treatment of women. I forget what the HR number was. I'll try to find it. But what struck me was, before we ever got serious with Iraq, they were talking about this. And you can find my past shows where we're addressing that. It's like, what are you guys doing? First of all, it's none of your damn business. I mean, we don't like to see women or anywhere or any human being obviously treated like a subnoid. But what are you talking about? And I'm serious, Andy. I mean, before we ever started hitting with Iraq, they were yakking about Iran.
Yeah.
And so here we are, 6 years down the road, and, it's
that
deja vu
kind of proves
over.
the point, that's the best way. I mean, you can have any Democrat you want running on a totally pacifist
platform, yeah.
Platform, and the minute that they can point to some woman being harmed somewhere, suddenly all the liberals here are like, I guess our pacifist Dem is going to have to do something here.
And here's another thing also. There was a Democrat show out of Sarasota. I'm not going to name it because I don't want anybody going there. I'm not going to give these assholes any kind of publicity. But I went, and I would be. It's a long story. When I was at the AM stations here, we partnered with them. Blah blah blah. He was on my show. I was on his show, and I told him, I said, look, it doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican. I'm saying we're never getting out of the Middle East. Forget it, because that's the plan for the future. And oh no. Well, here we are, and you're absolutely right. And I mean, he used to say, I know you think both parties are the same. I'm like, no, I don't think they're the same. My point is they play different parts that will lead to the same end. That's the point. And so here we are again. And of course, they'll say, well, we had to do this because of such and such. I understand that. There's always a reason to do it. My bottom line is we're not getting out of the Middle East, never until WW3. And so here we go. So you're right, Andy. I mean, Obama, yeah, fine. Well, he had to do that because X, Y, and Z happened. I understand. Bottom line, we ain't getting out. And now for what? May 17th?
Yeah.
Those pregnant pauses are killing me, man. I don't know if you passed out or walked out, All right, go ahead.
Well, on the 23rd, we also had the D.C. Metro train crash, which killed the General Worley, who was somehow involved in 911, their 911 response. We had the U.S. drone missile attacked a funeral in Pakistan on the 24th. And it's like, how can people, I'm sorry, I just don't agree that it's a good idea to be bombing people's funerals.
No, that would kind of be
drone missiles.
Yeah, that would be a deal killer for me.
On the 30th, another Airbus disappeared over the Indian Ocean. And also, Cynthia McKinney was arrested, and a bunch of people were arrested for trying to deliver aid to Gaza on a ship. And I don't know whatever happened with that. It kind of disappeared.
Well, who took him prisoner? Israeli Navy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there was a Honduran coup on the 1st of July.
That's still going on.
Sarah Palin was in Vanity Fair. There was a U.S. surge in Afghanistan on the 3rd. And then a bunch of deaths here in the next week. John Keel, everybody.
Yeah, there must have been like 24.
Yeah, a cyber attack on the White House, supposedly, coming from North Korea on the 8th. And then on the 9th, the Dems are saying that the CIA deceived Congress for years. So how could we, that's why we voted, to invade Iraq and all this stuff. Anyway, that was Thursday. Well, that gets us caught up on that calendar. One thing I could add about that, the number 11 thing that we were talking about before, the sun has an 11-year cycle. I'm looking now just at random notes that I've made. So, if the sun has an 11-year cycle, is that what's behind the Masonic interest in the number 11? And could it be that because I have heard, and I think it was Keel that researched this, that there's the same year cycle with the paranormal events, and that the paranormal events seem to peak when the Earth's magnetism is low. And I'm assuming that when the sun's flares are down, that would mean less magnetism. No, when the solar flares are high, that probably means magnetism is low on the Earth, because it's always reciprocal. If one side of the equation is on the downside, the other one's on the increase. So
right.
One would think that during the solar flares, and assuming that they run on an 11-year cycle, would be a higher time of more psychic activity. And of course, this goes back to the Mound thing, that if a mound has a really great difference in magnetism from low to high, that it's the difference that causes potential visions of creatures and things. And so it could be, that every 11 years there's a shift from low to high, and it's at these shift points in magnetism that you have a little window there for seeing creatures and things. And the Masons seem to know this.
But don't you think this has been known from the foundations of the earth? I mean, I don't, using the word pagan or whatever, and I don't necessarily mean it pejoratively, but I mean just, I don't know, being pantheist or whatever. I mean, for right or wrong, or for whatever you believe spiritually, folks were in tune with, obviously, the cycles, the whole idea of nature and everything. Now, what you want to worship is one thing. That's fine. But, I mean, so don't you think, though, that this has gone on forever? I mean, people had to be in tune with what was going on around them, because what else was there as far as markers, if you know what I mean? They knew things happened in certain repetitive forms.
Well, I think, and I think that the Masons, secret societies figure this out, and one has to wonder now if they're also doing other things at these key moments. Are they changing the way that they do their coverage in the media to coincide with changes in magnetism?
Well, let me ask you this, and playing devil's advocate for the most part. What about magnetism? Like, why is that a big deal, Andy?
Well, I guess you'd have to be a scientist to really answer it, but it does affect the brain, and obviously it affects the brain because all of these experiments have been done.
But aren't most health people, this is my understanding, lamenting the fact that the ground has lost a great deal of magnetism, like a certain amount of magnetism is a good thing? All right. I mean,
the body has the body likes to run at a certain level of hertz.
Agreed. That's right. We do have a frequency too.
Yeah, and we got those frequencies, and they've exhaustively researched, what different frequencies do to either the brain or the body. Frequencies can cause cancer. They could remotely. There's a possibility that they could, just beam something at you that would cause cancer.
And also, I think I'm right in saying this with the Royal Rife technology, that frequencies could eradicate disease.
Yes.
So if it's all about that, okay. So I mean, and that's where I'm leading. I'm not, not to trap you. I have any slant on this, but that everything is full of frequencies, and I assume. And, of course, I'm butchering this, but, magnetism is part of the deal.
One of the things about the Masons is that their interest in alchemical processes is not so much about transforming metals.
Metals, okay.
I mean, they do that. They do that in their corporations, nowadays, like carbide and so forth. But it's always really been about transforming the mass mind. And they do this by using the left-right debate, the Democrat-Republican debate, the fake,
liberal, conservative, left and right,
Hegelian dialectic.
Right.
But I do think it may be linked somehow to the sun cycle as to what they decide to do when. We do know that hypnosis, like in hypnosis, the way to increase the trance is that you have tests where you stop for a moment and then you test the person to see, where they're at. And usually there's confusion is introduced to deepen the trance, which we've talked about before. There's been some startling examples of that. and just one that I thought of that has to do with 911 was that the fact that Bush Sr. announced on 9/11/1990 that, he made the New World Order comments. And then 11 years later, and there's the number 11 again, they have the 911 attacks on 911. And that was maybe a test in a sense. Bush announcing openly, that they were.
Yeah, that was kind of like the inauguration. Yeah, the kickoff to the whole deal.
Yeah, let's see if people react, or you desensitize them to what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, I didn't pay any attention to that. The only thing that caught me funny about that speech with the 1,000 points of light, and I'm like, what? That's a little funky. And of course, I was, I hadn't even begun, my trip down the rabbit hole. But I was like, 1,000 points of light.
That does conjure up the image of the fairy lights, where you have thousands of lights, that can be seen at certain, spots that are old sacred spots.
Sure, but it also goes back to the whole illuminist situation and theosophist situation, all playing off the lights and that. I mean, I heard that. So that did catch my attention, but when he talked about a New World Order, it didn't happen to me. Now I look back, and of course I understand that, but that's been going throughout the whole 20th century, right through FDR, right down H.G. Wells. But, of course, this is not promoted, so people aren't aware of it. It's been one of the greatest backdoor conspiracies, if not the greatest, that the world has ever known. And here we are smack dab in it.
Couple more things, just random things before, we start to wind down here. There was some a recent story about some material found at the Roswell site that was traced back to Union Carbide. And this substantiates something that I've mentioned before. Keel was onto this pretty early, and he was saying that bakelite was found there, and that was, well, he didn't go carbide with it, but I did, bakelite being a carbide product. That seemed to implicate carbide early on. And then more recently, they found some more stuff indicating that there was some kind of explosion, and it was a material that was in these tanks that carbide made. So it's almost like, whenever there is a secret craft being developed or something, weapon, movement of nuclear materials that's not supposed to be happening, the UFO thing is brought in to cover it up. And then you have all these people out there parroting this line that the government's in league with the aliens, and it's a total misdirection, because the government's only in league with the aliens in the sense that they bring up the aliens whenever they need to cover something up. And it's just a slight twist that they've put on the whole thing to keep, thousands of people occupied with the reptilians, which I think are totally non-existent.
Well, but Andy,
I had an excuse.
No other strange occurrence, I'll just say that in quotation marks, has ever been more apparent to the public across my whole lifetime than the UFO thing. I mean, almost anybody that you would talk to on the street, if you got into a conversation about it, would not poo-poo it. I mean, they know something's going on. The fact that they're okay with that, or at least they're not upset about it, would indicate that whatever government's collusion was in this program, or at least the cover-up, really was successful, because everybody seems to kind of accept it. They don't know really what it's all about, but nobody seems to be freaking out around them, so they don't freak out either, which is what the whole herd mentality is about. So, I mean, I was onto this in 65 and 6. And, I was a dilettante with it, on the periphery of it, but, I've witnessed this for now how many decades. And no matter, Coast to Coast or any of these other shows, it doesn't matter. It's the one thing that people will probably countenance as being real, not knowing the whole deal, and it's okay if I don't. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, you're out there, and you've been to the MUFONs and to the Con. What do you make out of that?
Well
put.
Do you mean just that it's a cover-up for so many things? It's just a convenient cover-up?
No, that people know that something's going on out there. They may not necessarily believe it's alien. They're probably thinking, well, you know, it's our guys or whatever. But nobody really will have a hard time in this day and age saying something's weird overhead. But, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to deny because there's so many extraordinary craft that they have. They have a morphing plane now that can try to change its shape a little bit. You know, these are all things you can find online, actual planes.
Well, let me say this to you, and let me know if this. Before we do this, excuse me. Is there anywhere else you wanted to go? Because I would like to at least address a certain situation and your take on it. And we talked about this before. I know we have, but it's been a while. So, I mean, do you want to close up any loose ends or? Yeah,
I've got about three loose ends.
Let's do that. Okay, no problem. Go ahead.
One is that this grand mound in Seattle I was talking about with the extremely different magnetism is very close to where my wife saw a doppelganger, a ghost doppelganger of someone who had died. Another tangent is this blue. I had a blue Volkswagen. This was the one that my father drove. We got it right before he died.
Was it a bug?
It was a bug.
Okay.
When I was driving it, I did get stuck in the leg with something once. And I did have really, really high blood count, a white blood cell count around that time. They thought I had leukemia or something. But I recovered. And I'm wondering if I got stuck by the same needle that stuck him. Although he may have been in a different Volkswagen when he got stuck the first time. That's one thing I have to throw in there. Because we changed Volkswagens at some point. But it's possible that if this scenario is accurate, that they stuck a couple of pins in a couple of Volkswagens that we had, and maybe I just survived because of the timing. Assuming that's what happened, I don't know that it was, but maybe the virus just had a little bit left on the needle or something. But that car, that blue Volkswagen, was actually stolen from my house on Woodward Drive right around the time that it was revealed on the news that Manson and Moore had known each other. And it was weird because the car was stolen, but they didn't take it very far. They just took it down the hill and left it in front of Sarah Jane Moore's house.
Andy, let me ask you this. Is it right that Moore denies that she knew Manson from the old days on the block?
Is it what?
Doesn't Moore deny that she knew Manson from the days in West Virginia?
She doesn't deny it. No one asked her.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I imagine if someone asked her, she'd admit it.
Oh, I thought you said that she said, like, no way. Okay. All right.
No. She just never talks about it, West Virginia at all. She just doesn't go there.
I can understand that.
No one really asks what the deal was. Okay. Here's another one. Hepzibah, who is a
militant
a thunderbird kind of woman, a god, a female god.
All right.
Is said to be an emanation of Zarathustra. Now, what does this mean? This means that in the ancient legends we have a clarification of something that comes up. A lot of researchers like Patrick Harper have talked about this, how when you have Virgin Mary sighting, you'll often have a sighting of a male-robed figure who precedes her. And this is what happened with Harriet. She saw a male figure, it changed into, a Virgin Mary kind of figure. And this is apparently an ancient pattern, and one wonders what that's all about. And if this may have found its way into the Masonic lore, I think, in that some of the symbologies seem to point toward male and female. And I almost think that this is the underpinning for, the these Western societies that we live in that do take a much more feminine approach. They acknowledge, that they acknowledge the equality of the two sexes much more than, say, in the Muslim world. And this has shaped, how we, the kind of society we have. In the corporate world could be interpreted more as perhaps as a feminine thing. I think this is probably new to, most people don't think of it that way, but when you think of cooperation in a large organization, that's kind of a feminine aspect, and it's probably no mistake that, or whatever, the corporation has come to its perfection in societies like this. And I think that this comes from Masonry, because and I can't really point to anything specific, just what I've been noticing lately in the symbologies that I find in some of these old Masonic books. They'll often have the male-female symbol, and in between them they'll have the triangle, and the triangle may actually be lower than the two, so it kind of looks like a face. And then at times, the pyramid will be a mound, and you'll have the figures be on the mound, sort of like the crucifix. I even found one where they have INRI, the name that goes below Christ on the cross.
INRI.
Tied in with a double-headed bird.
Yeah.
And
that's
a lot of crossover. There's even a symbol with the mound, the cross, the face of the man on the cross, two snakes, a crescent coming up from the head, and then horns coming out of the crescent. Now, in the past, we've sort of assumed that the crescent and the horns were the same, but in some of these older things I'm finding, they're actually different. They mean different things. The horns are like insect. What's the word for those things? Proboscis, and that's sort of seen in the Southwest Birdman imagery. But in the Masonic imagery, the crescent, they grow out of the crescent, and this probably has led people to theorize that the Moorish tree panning, where they would cut a crescent in a person's forehead, and drill a hole in to cause enlightenment, that this is shown in these symbols, and I think that's probably true.
What was carved into Manson's forehead? Was that a swastika? You remember?
Yeah, and that would indicate a spin of energy coming into the pineal gland. So, his doing that may have more to it than people think.
That's right.
But I guess my point here is that I've seen this. There's a picture of George Washington I found, an old portrait, where he has a crescent hanging from his neck with the horns up. And this is what makes it Masonic. The horns, it's sort of like the hammer and sickle imagery that we've seen. The horns are up on the crescent. It's not going sideways.
But Andy, let me ask you this. I'm trying to visualize this before. I'm not going to go on the internet now and take a look. But, there seem to be a number of Revolutionary War figures who had this kind of what we would call necklace, if you would.
Yes.
With this crescent hanging in front of them.
That's it.
Well, I'm thinking it's a throat guard. You know what I mean?
Yes, it looks like a throat guard.
All right, so we got this. So now we have to look at this as being some kind of talisman and not anything to do with combat. Well,
it could serve both purposes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
I could see that, but now that gives a different spin to that, because I've always looked at it and gone, "What the hell is that about?"
Yeah.
All right.
Another loose end is this Codex Gigas, which it's called the Devil's Bible. It's been in the news lately. Jim Mars ties it to the Osiris Pillar, or else I'm tying it to the Osiris pillar.
Okay.
Mars wrote an article about Tennessee and how there's all this Masonic stuff going on there, supposedly involving Osiris's head being in a pillar. And anyway, this Codex Gigas devil, it's a fascinating image, and it's sort of entrapped in a space in this drawing in the Bible that looks like an 11, and it looks like a Garuda. It's in a Garuda pose, and it's placed in this tight space like a cell with two walls on either side that looks like sort of looks like the number 11. And this may be some allusion to the Garuda, or transference of the idea of the Garuda into something demonic that was. It's all very strange, and supposedly somebody wrote this Bible in one night in order to get out of being punished or walled inside by other monks for life.
Cask of Amontillado, yes. We'll wall you behind the wall. What was that, Roger and Ugliano? I can't remember that. That was horrible. Do you remember that story from Poe? That was based apparently on a real situation that Dante wrote about.
Well, they used to do that with the monks.
They would wall them up and say, see you later?
Well, they do that in Tibet for hermitages, but they come back, after 2 years or 5 or 7 or whatever is allotted, and they let them out. But,
like they're going to be alive.
No, they are. Well, they feed them.
Oh, no. In Dante's Inferno and in...
Well, they don't feed them there.
No, yeah. In a Poe's book, Poe's short story, it's like, see you later. Yeah. What a way to... Oh, that sucks. Okay.
One of my crazy theories, which I don't have time to really go into, but I'll mention it, is that it could be that new creatures, they keep wondering how does evolution occur because you can't find any real links between species. And I'm thinking that there may be times when, say, the magnetism is a certain way, is acting in a certain way, where new species can be created perhaps instantaneously on Earth, but I think it may have to do with observation, whether or not there's anyone observing it. Because we know that observation affects the way that molecules behave. And my crazy theory is that one of the reasons species don't evolve right in front of us is that we're here observing the process. And so if you grow up seeing the world a certain way, it becomes concretized in your mind, and therefore nothing... Since everyone's thinking the same concretized way, nothing changes. But let's say there was a cataclysm and most of the people were wiped off the face of the planet. Then you'd have a situation where photons were not being observed by humans, because it's been proven that we can change their behavior. So maybe when we're not observing them, they're then able to concoct new ways of arranging themselves.
Well, if they go in the woods where nobody sees, because that's the way the teddy bears have their picnic.
Mull it over.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm watching those alligators because I don't want them to do anything other than what they are. That could be another whole sci-fi movie. God almighty, those things are predators nonpareil.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm almost. What have I got? I've got another one, two, couple. The Arkansas Gazette reported on Fred Krisman. Krisman was the CIA guy that was present at the first UFO sighting of the modern times, the Maury Island incident.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one wonders why the Arkansas Gazette was interested in Krisman. And since Indrid Cold had a connection to Arkansas, one wonders if there's a connection between Indrid Cold and Fred Krisman. Krisman was Lebanese, and there were some Lebanese folks living on my road. And interestingly, there's a new article by Adam Gorightly about Tuesday Weld. The guy, the insider who's sort of spilling the beans on Tuesday Weld is Lebanese, and he is claiming that the new occult queen who ousted Tuesday Weld is a singer called Tiffany, who is Lebanese. And Tiffany did a bunch of kind of pukey pop songs in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And then somehow Turner, this guy Turner, the whatever you call it, deep throat of this situation, claims that he was in an arranged marriage with Tiffany from a young age, according to Lebanese custom, but it was revoked or something. Anyway, it just reminded me of Chrisman. Chrisman's a character we have to keep an eye on. One other thing, famous UFO witness Betty Andreasen has been covered a lot in the media over the years. She had an interesting experience where they put her into she claims the aliens put her in this chair. It sounds like the Montauk chair. It had a clear coating, plastic. You get locked into the clear plastic coating in the chair, and somehow this sealing of the body, making the body immobile, is a key factor in increasing one's psychic abilities. So they were putting her in a chair that would increase her psychic abilities. Supposedly these are aliens doing it to her, but I imagine she was probably experimented on. And in the book that Walter, what's his name? I can't remember the author's name right now. I've talked about him before. He's famous. Do you remember his name?
You want to?
There it is.
No.
Fowler. I'm sorry, Raymond Fowler. In the book by Fowler, she talks about this chair, and then she immediately starts. They start talking about a hypnosis session. Well, she was doing this hypnosis sessions, and she was retelling under hypnosis what the aliens had done to her. And so after they had put her in this chair, then suddenly in the hypnosis session, she stops and she goes, "Wait a minute! I'm being visited right now by this glowing bird." And she basically had a vision of the phoenix and had this tremendous religious experience where, in front of all the doctors who were examining her, which they described as the most moving religious experience they've ever seen in someone, that Andreasen saw the phoenix, it went through its changes, its symbolic changes, and it ends up as a worm or something. Basically it burns up, turns into a worm, and then resurrects. And she talked to the phoenix, and she said, "Are you Christ?" And it more or less said yes. So here we have somebody, in the UFO world with a high profile making the claim more or less that this bird man thing claims that it is the same force as Christ. Anything else? The Silver Bridge. I was looking up the Silver Bridge information on the web to see where the National Archives had their copy. And it's stored at Fort Meade. A lot of different books are stored at Fort Meade, which, of course, if you know anything about it, is where the NSA is headquartered. So for some reason, the NSA has Gray Barker's original copy of the Silver Bridge that he submitted in order to get his copyright number. Does that make sense?
No, but that's okay.
Anyway, it doesn't make sense? I mean, you think it would
everything makes sense and nothing makes sense. No, I mean...
Well, you'd think it would be at the National...
you would?
What is the...
Archives, you mean, or what?
Yeah, the National Archives.
No, but I mean, again...
Not at Fort Meade.
No, definitely not at Fort Meade. It'd be in the Smithsonian or something like that, or the National Archives. It's also there in D.C. But that didn't happen, did it?
What? What didn't happen?
Where the work is...
right,
stored.
it ended up at Fort Meade somehow.
Yeah, okay, that's not right.
Anyway, that's all I have. Did you have a issue you wanted to go into?
Yeah, I did, but I forgot about it.
Oh.
No, there was something we want to touch upon, but honestly, I forgot, and I'm not going to stop the recording and go back and do it. It's not that big a deal, honestly, but I guess one of the things that I find on the horizon now, which is looming, and I'm wondering how much it's going to intrude upon people in the United States and their lives, is all this we went through this once before, but now it seems to be brought back on steroids, and that is they're going to give us all this vaccine to fight the swine flu. Oh, we don't have enough, so who do we want to get vaccinated right up front? And it's like, look, I don't want your shit. I don't want anybody sticking a needle in my arm. And I said this to Lady Biz. I mean, I'm wondering if there's going to come a time, if you work in a public place, which most people do, that if you don't get the vaccine, you're going to be seen literally as a pariah and, as un-American and all this other crap, which I've already heard from people who have found out how I feel about vaccines. Because I think vaccines, I don't know how you feel, Andrew, but they're bullshit. It's another one of these presumed silver bullets that are great, never been proven in science, but just widely accepted because the vaccine makers, and this goes back to Rockefeller, are the ones who devised this shit and just waved their magic wand and said, it's a good thing. And everyone went, oh, yeah, ignoring a lot of the books that are talking about vaccination as being scientifically and medically unsound. So really, people keep, these patriots and all this other crap, they keep looking for tanks to come across the horizon and people to bomb them, and they're not going to do it that way. They're going to do it through things like this and through deprivations. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Andrew, if you feel vaccines are good, you tell me, because I don't want to go on, off on this. But I mean, are you a vaccine kind of guy?
No, I don't want to give Donald Rumsfeld any money for a bogus vaccine that's been tainted with flu. I mean, that's basically what came out was that the lab that was making Tamiflu somehow concocted the swine flu that found its way into the population. At least that's the claim that was being made by someone who seemed to know something about it.
Well, you see, I get a little confused, but I don't pay a lot of attention because I'm not taking anything. If you take a vaccination, it's a prophylactic. It's a preventative, right? I mean, so that you don't get virus or disease A, B, or C.
Actually, it wasn't related to Tamiflu, but it's the same company that makes Tamiflu. They somehow came up with the swine flu.
But after you get it, you really don't find anything that's going to be ameliorative or palliative. I mean, once you got it, you got it. And I don't know what they're pushing this Tamiflu as. Like, you should have it, if you take it before, it's a prophylactic, and that is the science behind, or the reasoning behind vaccinations. It's a prophylactic. It's a preventative. Once you got it, you got it. And ain't anything going to, basically mitigate the symptoms until it runs your body. But, again, if anybody wants to read Eleanor McBean's The Poison Needle, and that's on my suggestive reading site on thinkorbeeaten.com/the Knoll, and our first e-zine, which was Inside the Grassy Knoll. Go to Vyzygoth's recommended readings, and you can find Eleanor McBean's account. And there's others also out there. The Silent Needle, which was by a compatriot of hers whose name has escaped me. But, I mean, this is a widely assumed silver bullet, which has never, ever been proven. And I'm one of those kids in the 50s and 60s who lined up for my Salk vaccination and all this other crap. And it was garbage. So, I mean, this is a program, like a lot of the parts of the conspiracy, that's like, well, why would they give it all? Well, you tell me why they would give this crap out. But I don't care if it's well-meaning or not. Don't stick your needle in me. Leave your shit out. I got a good immune system, and if I fall to it, good, then kill my ass. But please, that to me is the most frightening aspect of the brave new world that we're about to enter. I don't give a crap about national ID cards, all this other shit. It's vaccines. Leave me alone. My body is my body. But I'll tell you what, Andy, I mean, I've written editorials about this and have gotten a very nasty, virulent backlash. by people who just think, I'm just the breeder of disease, who just wants to walk around and just share my disease with everyone else. I mean, it's absolutely asinine.
I think you're onto something, because what's going to be the key problem here in the next 5 years? The problem is baby boomers needing health care, no money, needing health care, with the economy collapsing. How are we going to take care of all these old people?
Right.
There's no money, not enough money to pay for them. So having a big die-off would be the solution for people that have no morals whatsoever.
Well, my point, all right, now, I don't know where you're going with this, but my point would be the die-off is in the freaking vaccinations, not in the swine flu. If the swine flu kills you, it kills you. You're done.
Either or.
Right. All right. But I don't want to take your crap because, as McBean stated in the Poison Needle, I mean, she said, I was around when the soldiers came back from World War I, and the only ones who had the dreaded Spanish flu were those who had gotten vaccinated. She's claiming without a doubt. And of course, but when you watch the Today Show with Nancy Snyderman, that's freaking true. I mean, I want to reach through the TV and strangle that bitch. I mean, she hasn't found a vaccine she's not happy about. Oh, cervical cancer. Let's let those teenagers, live. Oh, God. I mean, it's so bad. And, I mean, they just get up there and they lie their asses off. Ay, ay, ay. And so where does the depopulation come from? Well, exquisitely ironic is from the things that are supposed to stop you from having the problems. Isn't that perfect? How perfect is that, sardonically?
Well, I'd forgotten about that swine flu from the soldiers' vaccinations. That's true. That is a really good point.
All right, I remember the name, Honoroff, Honorooff. I think it's Ida. She was the principal writer of The Silent Killer. McBean wrote The Poison Needle. But it goes beyond that. I mean, even I've heard Lorraine Day talk about that it's like stupid science. That's why everybody who gets a flu shot comes down with the flu or a cold. It's stupid science. But it's been driven by the Rockefellers. All the medical students that have come through now, these universities, are reading and ingesting nothing but information driven by the robber barons' pharmaceutical kingdom. I mean, and you know yourself, Andy, even in your lifetime, which so far is still shorter than mine. I mean, in the last 10 to 15 years, I never saw so many commercials for taking shit for which there is no problem. Restless leg syndrome? Kiss my ass. I'm not taking anything for that. I know it sucks. You get up, you walk around, you sleep somewhere on the couch. I know, you know what I mean? It's like they're driving everybody to take pharmaceuticals. And this goes back also to what it says in the Bible about pharmacos, which is drugs. Everybody thinks it means cocaine and heroin and all. No, it's talking about drugs. And so people go running for this kind of drug and that kind of drug. Leave my system alone. I can die very well without it. And this
another thing they do is they change with blood pressure. It used to be that a certain number was considered high, and what they've done is they've brought that number down and attached it to the cost that you pay for your insurance.
All this is going to happen. I mean, I don't care if it's Obama or not. It doesn't make a difference. It was coming this way anyway. If you're going to get government health care, you are going to get so strictured behind parameters that they set that everybody's going to be winding up, for the most part, as high-end risks, especially as you get older, without a doubt. I mean, it all comes down to the same thing. You're basically better off putting me on the outskirts of the town and letting the wolves eat me when I'm infirm. That's what we're looking at, without a doubt. So, if you use a credit card and you go to the store and you buy too much beer or you buy too much vodka or you buy too much, frozen fried bullshit, that's all going to go into a system that's going to profile you, and you're going to be found as a health risk. That's where it's going. And
and they'll blame your illness on you.
On what you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, I mean, listen, a lot of America could eat very much better than they do. There's no two ways about it. But as you also know, and you've seen for yourself, and you have a child also. I mean, there's this conflicting information between all the good stuff that you're supposed to eat, all those Kentucky Fried commercials and, Checkers and all this other crap, McDonald's, that drive people to eat that crap. And that's the very crap that's killing everybody. And when you go in and get tested, it's like, sorry, you're in a really high-risk group here. So, again, you have the everlasting dichotomy, which is where we're going, because everybody's an enemy of the state because of whatever you do. Where are you walking?
Walking down to get a drink of water.
I was going to say, you ought to install carpets if you want to hide that stuff, but anyway. Well, everything else is a harangue from here on in. But, if you want to pull this to an end, because we're heading up on 2 hours,
yeah.
Again, we're caught up in time, and that doesn't mean we're not going to do other things. But, Andy, I also wanted to ask you is, there are also some side issues that you get involved with that I'd like to talk to you about later on, besides the timeline that we've done for. How long have we done this for, Andy? Have we done this for 5 or 6 years?
I don't no.
Maybe 4 or something?
Three to 4.
So this would make it what? Show number 40 across all those years, right?
Yeah.
All right. That's pretty good. All right, so let me ask you, you can have the parting shot, but if you want to address certain specific issues which you've gotten involved with, and also because of Adam, do you feel like doing that?
Like what?
Since we're airing this out on air, I would say perhaps Kennedy assassination. That's something. I'm going to have another guy come on who's written a book about it. And I know Adam and I corresponded when I had Joan Mellon on, and he's not happy with her take on Kerry Thornley, which is fine.
What was her take on Thornley?
Well, we can't get into that right now. And I'm not evading it, but I would like to do that another time, maybe with all three of us on. That would be a possibility.
Oh, is that what you're saying? We should perhaps come back and talk about that thing, sort of thing?
That would be one thing as a topic that we've not addressed specifically. In this timeline, we hit everything. But also, besides that, what else was there I wanted to...
Well, I guess as far as Thornley goes, without getting into it really too much, I'm not attached to the idea that was him in the Hughes film. I'm not... it's inconclusive, and that's fine with me. If we don't know who it is, I think it's probably someone that was in his Marine unit with Oswald, because there were several of them that looked like Oswald. It's like they put them all together and they were studying them all.
Yeah.
Well, Thornley was there studying Oswald.
Well, I don't want to get too much into it, but I think there's a place where Mellon and also Adam are on the right track. I'll just leave it at that now. It's a shameless teaser, but I would like to do that. Also, the other thing is, which I had addressed way back when, and Adam was cool with it, and you were cool with it, and so was McGowan, and that's talking about just exactly how much of a real demon was Charlie Manson, and how much of a patsy was he. Those are two things I'd really like to touch upon, whether we do it, in a triumvirate or, whatever, but... I don't know. If you'd be cool with that, I think it'd be worth visiting.
That would, that would be good. Let me say one more thing about Thornley.
Sure. Go ahead.
What I find incriminating about Thornley is that he wrote a book about Oswald prior to the assassination. Now, he didn't name Oswald in that book, but it was based on Oswald, and he freely admits that it was.
Okay.
And it was basically the template used to label... To explain Oswald. It was Thornley's take on this communist dude in the Marines and how, assuming he was trying to assume what made Oswald tick. And then the day that Oswald shot, just to give you an example of how much pull Thornley had, suddenly his book is mentioned on the front page of the New Orleans papers the day that Oswald shot. Here we have a guy who's written a book about a man just like Oswald.
Go figure.
and I don't think people realize that.
It
was instantly in the media. Thornley's book a profile of Oswald was instantly in the media being used to explain why Oswald did what he did. And that's just too much of a coincidence.
And also, I mean, go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, and then Thornley, of course, claims that he was meeting with E. Howard Hunt before the assassination, telling Hunt, what would be the best way to frame this guy, frame him as a communist. All the things that were in Thornley's book. It was almost like Thornley was selling his book to Hunt as a template.
Yeah. Well, what that reminds me about with the release of that article by Thornley, and that's also what happened in the newspapers on 9/12/2001. They had it all down about how this all happened in a matter of physics, and you're dealing with a situation that had never happened before, ever around the world, and it's never happened again. And they had this all down, broken down in the New York Times and all these other papers. And it's like, well, how did you come upon that, dudes?
Right.
How did you come upon that when there's a situation never happened before, no analysis done at the site because it was much too early. Of course, it was the same day. And you guys got it all down how it happened. Kiss my purple ass.
Yeah, in a free and honest democratic society, the headline would be investigation opened into attack.
No,
and that
they
would
had
be
it
it.
all down. Yeah, there's schematics, the whole 9 yards. Oh, you talk about the Emperor's new clothes. Holy mackerel. All right, Mr. Colvin, we've caught up with a long, long time on these two shows.
Here's my cell phone answering ring. Listen to this.
Okay.
I like that. Reminds me of the old Chiller Theater.
What's not to like? Chiller Theater. All right. Listen, in that vein, I guess I can haunt you once again to come on for another show sometime down the road.
Absolutely.
All right. Also, with regard to what we were talking about, and I'll give Adam a hoot if he's still talking to me, and we'll see if we can do something. All right?
All righty. Bye.
All right.
Do